There's lack of water, lack of irrigation. They won't give them money for irrigation. They stymie us even in this. You know, the federal government in 1887 started what they call the Allotment Act, or the Dawes Act. And they created this. It was it was one of the biggest land steal that's ever been perpetrated in the United States. At this time, American Indians owned approximately 150 to 160 million acres of land somewhere in this vicinity. And they figured, this is after we had, I'll go back a little further. By 1871, most of our Indian people had been conquered and placed on reservations. So then in 1887, they decided we still had too much land, around 140, 150, 160 million acres in this area. So some senator by the name of Dawes came about with the Dawes Act, or they call it the Allotment Act, whereby they were going to allot each Indian 160 acres of land. They did a lot of preparation in this, and after allotting the different, each Indian 160 acres of land, they found out there was a surplus of land left. So they bought this from us for a song, and we lost 90 million acres out of 140 to 150, 60 million acres we had. We lost 90 right off the bat. And they justified this by saying that if we get 160 acres of land, that they would take pride in ownership and immediately become farmers and ranchers. And yet they put us on the worst land in the United States. No water. It's completely, you can't grow anything on rocks. And that's, we've got some of the worst lands, I said, in the United States. We have been suppressed religiously, mentally, physically. They've committed religious genocide, cultural genocide, and mental genocide. Physical, mental, and religious genocide. Can you imagine this? We're the only race of people in the United States that this has actually happened to.
Change the subject again.
Yes.
You wear a turquoise necklace.
Yeah.
I see a lot of the people at this conference, Indians,
yeah,
wearing Indian garb.
Yes.
Do you wear it all the time?
Yes.
Do they, do you think?
I don't know. I'm the director of the Indian Studies program at the University of California, and we've got a tremendous amount of Indianists that's suddenly springing up. Indian kids are letting their hair grow long. They're suddenly wearing their beadwork and their jewelry. In old days, a lot of people were ashamed they're Indian because they used to have signs out. No dogs or Indians allowed. You couldn't go into the restaurants. You couldn't go into the bars. You couldn't go here. You couldn't go there. They wouldn't employ Indians in the school systems once you got a degree. And we were discriminated against and kicked around so badly that a lot of people didn't claim they were Indian. They claimed they were Mexican or Portuguese or Italian or something, Greek. And all of a sudden now you don't have to be ashamed you're an Indian. Not that some of us were, but they used to kick us around so badly. So some of us are so proud about it. We wear these things. And I do this to inspire young people, to show them. Wear something you're Indian. Show your, if you're proud of it, well, wear it. I'm not searching and seeking my identity. I know who I am and where I came from. I speak my language, and I'm enrolled member of a Sioux tribe. I speak 2 different languages. But the thing is, I want to show young people, you don't have to be ashamed you're Indian. Be proud of it. And I wear this. I bought this from a Hopi traditional Indian leader in Arizona a few years ago. And I think it's beautiful. I like it. I could wear beadwork. And a lot of people, I've had some Indians ask me, do you have to wear that to be Indian? I said, no, I don't have to wear this to be Indian. I am Indian. I know who I am and where I came from. But I'm proud I'm Indian. And I'll show it in different ways.
The point I was trying to get to is you see among, say, especially in our university community, you see a lot of young kids, white kids, non-Indian kids,
yes,
black kids,
yes,
wearing Indian jewelry and costumes,
yes,
or portions of costumes.
This is...
What's bringing that out?
I think this is beautiful. You know, we've got an awful lot to offer our culture, and I think once we start informing non-Indians of what we have contributed to this country and the makeup of it, I think they're going to be, we'll break down a lot of the racial barriers and a lot of the mysteries and myths that have been created. And this is one thing that these Indian Studies programs that are suddenly springing up in different universities and colleges are going to create. They're going to create a better understanding of American Indian. And our jewelry and beadwork is beautiful. And they're just now finding out about it because it's just now beginning to get into the urban areas. And people are wearing these things because, not white people don't wear Indian beadwork or jewelry because they're proud of it. They wear it because, it's pretty. And look at the styles of clothing now. These headbands, beaded headbands, all of a sudden your models are modeling clothes after Indian styles and fashions. And this doesn't bother me. It irritates me that we're not getting our fair share of the profits of it. But it is nice for them to realize, to see non-Indians suddenly realizing that we do have something that's worthwhile, and they're taking it up, and they're picking it up. I think this is beautiful that they're doing it.
You mentioned that you'd like to get the profits of the people who are not exploiting, but are using a lot of the culture, the Indian culture. Yesterday, I heard, I would guess 5 Indians speaking in these different symposiums and workshops say, in effect, that there are many Indians living on reservations who do not want industry to come in. They saying, in effect, that many Indians, their value judgments, their value systems do not include the striving for money.
Mm-hmm.
Yet, one of the points that the commissioner made yesterday was he wants to bring industry to the reservation to help them grow. How can these two things be brought together?
Now, there's two trains of thought on this. A lot of, I've talked to different reservation leaders and what have you, and some of them, I think there's a tremendous amount of them that want industry to come to reservations. At least their people will be employed right there. I'm advocating this, that they bring industry to reservations rather than force our people off into the urban areas where many of them become part of the melting pot, and they become part of the ghettos and the dropouts of society there. They get on, they become alcoholics, or they get hooked up with narcotics and what have you, or they just become part of the poor ghettos that they have there. So if they would set up industry on our reservations, our people wouldn't have to leave. They could find employment right there.
Do they want industry, though?
A lot of them do, yes. I know one particular tribal leader who was a chairman. He was actively trying to bring in industry. In fact, a lot of reservations are trying to bring industry in. This way their people don't have to leave. This is one gripe of Indian people about the relocation program that the Bureau of Indian Affairs has. They say it siphons off the cream of the crop. When some of our better Indians, they're going into urban areas, they never return. Some do, some don't. But to bring industry in on reservations, I think would be much better than sending our people into the urban areas and having them become washouts. They're actually transferring our people from one pocket of poverty to another, in these senses. You spoke of exploitation a while ago. This is something that goes on continually. You take Arizona, New Mexico. They got a place in Gallup down there. They sponsor these big centennials each year, and they make thousands and thousands of dollars. And they pay the Indians $5 or $6 a day to participate in these and perform for white people. And they buy their jewelry at 1/10 of what they sell it for. For instance, in South Dakota, they give the Indian women $8 and $9 to make a pair of moccasins, and they sell them for $50. Some places they give them $10 and $12, and they sell these moccasins for $50. I was told the other day where one Indian woman at Wounded Knee, South Dakota, was getting 50 cents an hour for beadwork, and they sell the stuff for fantastic prices. I bought a pair of moccasins there about 6 months ago for $50, and they sell necklaces $15, and they give the woman 50 cents an hour for beading these. Getting back to Arizona, New Mexico, they sponsor these big centennials, and they hire Indians to come in for $3 and $4 and $5 a day to perform, and they make thousands and thousands of dollars, and yet they won't let Indians in certain bars, certain restaurants. They won't let them in certain other establishments. They don't hire them on a police department. They don't hire them in a fire department, in other city departments. They don't put them in the state departments. They kick them around, but yet they love to exploit them. In fact, that's how half of those, not half, but a large amount of those cities in Arizona and New Mexico even exist, is through the exploitation of Indian people, selling their artifacts, their jewelry and beadwork, blankets and different things. And they make their living off of them. They love that, but they hate Indians. And this has to be stopped.
I suppose it's hard for a non-Indian, say, going through these areas, seeing all the Indian products out there, to think, gee, if they're selling all this stuff, they must be making a lot of money.
Yes.
Right? And then they see the Indians, and the Indians are poor, and they aren't making any money.
And then you go into these trading posts on Indian reservations, run by Caucasians or non-Indians. They charge 1.5 to 2 times the amount that you could buy the same stuff for off the reservation. But many of our Indian people don't have cars, no transportation off. They can't go off the reservation. And they're broke. They don't have the money, so they charge at these places. And they add to their bills. They overcharge them. And when they get their monthly welfare checks or what have you, and they pay these people, it's like the old company store. You never get out of debt. It's like saying, yeah, I know the game is crooked, but it's the only one in town. And these stores overcharge, knowing that these people don't have transportation into these urban areas to buy food. Many of them are broke and they have to charge. And they fleece our Indian people right and left. There's so much exploitation that's going on. It's unbelievable. And Indian people that are in these positions that are being exploited, they can't stop it. So it's up to urban Indians or Indians who are in a position of authority or who are heads of different organizations or what have you to put a stop to it. We're going to have to start setting up more communication between urban Indians and reservation Indians and different Indian organizations, and we're going to start having to get together. We should develop an Indianness, an Indian brotherhood, rather than cut each other down. There's still this fighting between different Indian tribes and different Indian organizations that goes on in some cases. And we're going to have to stop this and develop an Indian brotherhood and help each other.
Scott Momaday talked about the spiritualism of the Indian. He described in his speech, did you hear it?
Yeah, no, I didn't hear it. I heard somebody tell about it.
In his speech, he described how the Kiowa Sundance was outlawed by the Army at Fort Sill, Oklahoma.
Yes.
And he says that the Army destroying the Sundance destroyed the Kiowas. And the Sundance was a religious ceremony. It wasn't Christian, but it was religious.
Yes.
It was a spiritual ceremony. Momaday contends that the spiritualism of the Indian is in effect his recognition of the fact that he is a part of nature.
Yes.
Now there's an ecological revolution going on in this country.
Yes.
What part do you think the Indian can play in that ecological revolution? See, and because of his relationship with nature, or his...
Well, you mentioned something. I'd like to elaborate on this.
Right.
You mentioned something about the Sundance, how the U.S. Army killed this off. The U.S. Army, this was part, as I mentioned earlier, in 1887, the federal government enacted laws forbidding American Indians to worship as they please. They also enriched them in 1904. They lasted until 1933. At the same time they did this, they branded Indian religion as pagan and forbid them to practice their different religions. And the Sundance was one of the main things that they stamped out, or they tried to. They forbid Indians to do the Sundance up until 1933 it was. And by doing this, the Sundance was the greatest form, it was the highest form of religious practice that the Plains Indians had. And they would meet once a year, and it was man's renewal with nature. They all got together, and it involved nature and man and his surrounding and the land and everything. It was his spiritual renewal process that he went through once a year. It was a form of self-sacrifice, and it was the greatest Indian religious ritual that they had. And they considered it, many writers and people I've talked to considered it, it's the ultimate of all Indians to participate in the Sundance. Now I'm speaking of Plains Indians. And for them to forbid this was to really cut off the taproot of Indian religion. And they knowingly did this because they knew that the Sundance meant that much to Indian religion. And they outlawed this. As I said, until 1933 and 34, they finally started letting it come about. And then only on some reservations.
Is the Sundance
it's still performed now. The Sioux perform it, and some of the other tribes perform it now.
Do they do it as a ritual, or does it still have...
It had a very religious significance to it. And it was a test of man's strength in some cases. They actually pierced the skin, and it was a sort of form of self-sacrifice. You had to go through a purification ceremony, and you did without food and water for 4 days at a time, and it was a complete, it was a self-sacrifice, and there were many forms of sacrifice in this. I've never gone through the Sundance. I'd like to someday, but everybody I've talked to said it's a very moving thing. And in the old days, it was the greatest form of Indian religion that you could go through.
Is it that meaningful today, do you think?
It's not that meaningful today due to the fact, I say, it's been stamped out for so many years. There's a renewal of it, though. There's a rebirth. There's
it's growing.
A renaissance of Indian history and culture that is developing. And what a lot of people don't realize is we've got a social movement going on among American Indians, and it's mainly among the youth. That this dissatisfaction and frustration and anger is coming out in. And they're sick and tired of what's happened and of empty promises that never materialize, and of old Indian leaders getting up and telling white people what the hell they want to hear and never trying to change anything. And they're frustrated, and they want change. And they want it now. They don't want to wait 20 years from now. And they can see the problems, and they know how to solve them, but they need they need a vehicle to get there. And this is why Indian organizations are springing up. That's why Indian courses are being asked to be instituted in different colleges and universities. And this is something that a lot of people don't realize, that there is an Indian movement. It may be small, but it's coming about, and it's mainly among the youth. And you can see it in their frustration, their anger. You're going to have, within the next 4 to 5 years, you're going to have a tremendous amount of young, educated Indians running around who know what they want, how to get there, and what they want to do. Because all these colleges are suddenly, not all of them, but our Indians are beginning to get in gradually. And the ones who come out are going to be a much more enlightened Indian. As I said earlier, over 50% of the Indian population is under 21. And I think you're going to find that within the next 4 years, you're going to have a lot of more Indians. More Indians are going to be demanding a fair share of the pie, or asking for it, I should say. I don't think violence is the way. My organization, United Native Americans, is not advocating violence, and I don't think that's the way. I don't condone it. I think we can do what we want without violence, but we're going to have to become more vocal. And the vocal Indians you usually see are younger Indians who are frustrated, disgusted, and they're going to get us there. It's the youth, and what we're seeking is self-determination, the right to run our own affairs, the right to run our own destiny. Our own destiny.
What do you think we'll see in this country for the Indians, say, 30 years from now?
You know, they consider me a radical. I'm considered a militant, a dissident, and what have you, because I'm speaking out in many cases as I do, and yet I don't advocate violence. I'm only telling the truth. And to tell the truth, it hurts some people, and they classify you as a militant, a dissident. And this irritates me at times, and then I think, well, it's the only way that I can get my point across, because the news media will interview me, or they'll talk to me. And if an Indian who had much more to say than I do would stand there and tell them, would you interview me? They wouldn't. But once they classify you as a militant or a dissident, they will interview you and talk to you. So all the actors aren't in Hollywood. There's more actors out of Hollywood than in. And once they do come and interview me, I can get my points across, and I can say something that is constructive without shouting and without obscenities and what have you. And I think that within the next, as you say, the next 30 years, I'm considered a militant now. I'm going to look like a Sunday school teacher. I think within the next 30 years, they're going to look back and say, well, who was he? What did he ever do? And I don't know. I think I'm going to be considered I'll be considered an Uncle Tom by 30 years.
Do you think the militancy and dissidency and that approach to the problem, do you think it'll still be necessary then?
No. I think that this phase we're going through, where the establishment is suddenly listening to different minority groups voice their disapproval, such as now, I think this is a fad we're going through, and I think it's going to fade out within the next 6 months to a year. And what a lot of people don't realize is, I don't condone some of the things that have gone on among other minority groups. And for instance, right now, they're trying to convict Bobby Seale of the Black Panthers of crossing a state line to incite a riot in Chicago. Now, whether he did or not, I don't know. But the fact is, if they convict him of crossing a state line to incite a riot, they could pick me up any day of the week for crossing a state line by saying, you're going to incite a riot. Now, what I'm trying to say is, we're losing many, many of our freedoms every day. And if we lose the right to speak out and voice our disapproval of what's going on, and they can arrest you by saying you're going to incite a riot, this is going to kill freedom of speech. And there will be no more speaking out of the problems of minority people by different minority leaders. And this is a dangerous thing to happen. We're on the verge of losing our freedom of speech if this happens. As I said, I don't condone what the Black Panthers and some of their tactics. I think and trying to instill pride and confidence in our people and self-determination is good. But I don't like violence myself, and I don't think Indian people do, and I don't think it's our way. But on the other hand, if they kill off the right to voice our disapproval, this is going to be the end of freedom of speech. We're heading towards a military state. This is my feeling. They're killing off more and more of our privileges. We're sacrificing more and more of our privileges every day for rules and regulations and for more security. And we give up too much security, and all you've got guaranteed rules and regulations to live by. This is terrible.
So 30 years from now, you think we'll still be, hopefully, we'll still be fighting the problem rather than having...
I think many of our problems will be, Indians' problems will be solved by then, because we're beginning to speak up. Our people are becoming more vocal. And as I say, our young people that are going to college now are planning on going to college. We're going to have Indians in all facets of industry to voice our disapproval. This is going to be the end of freedom of speech. We're heading towards a military state. This is my feeling. They're killing off more and more of our privileges. We're sacrificing more and more of our privileges every day for rules and regulations and for more security. And we give up too much security, and all you've got guaranteed rules and regulations to live by. This is terrible.
So 30 years from now, you think we'll still be, hopefully, we'll still be fighting the problem rather than having...
I think many of our problems will be, Indians' problems will be solved by then, because we're beginning to speak up. Our people are becoming more vocal. And as I say, our young people that are going to college now are planning on going to college. We're going to have Indians in all facets of industry and education and all over the country. They're going to be, they'll be getting involved. And I think, as I said, 30 years from now, I think you'll find Indians, I look for our law to improve over 50% in the next 50 years. In fact, more than that. Right now we're in a very sad state. Economically, educationally, even mentally. They have so browbeat our people. But there are always kind of encouraging signs when you see our Indian youth suddenly beginning to speak up. They're attending youth conferences, conferences like this now, and demanding to be heard. And when I say be heard, they want to take part. They want to know what's going on, how it affects them also, and they want to take part in this. At Berkeley, California, where I'm head of the Indian Studies program, we let the Indian students themselves pick out the courses they wanted. They picked the courses. They helped select the curriculum and formulate it. And we employ Indian students as readers, as teachers and teaching assistants. And they help in every way. And so these programs were designed by them and for them. I just am maintained as a director of the program. I teach a couple courses. But the students have an active say-so. And this is something that's going on all over in every race, in every nationality. Youth is demanding to be heard. And youth all over is sick and tired and frustrated of what's going on. They can see what needs to be done, and they don't want to wait 30 and 40 years for changes. They want changes now. And this is great, too, to see this come about, because there's so many things that need changing.
Personal question.
Yeah.
You were working on your PhD till you took this job. What are you going to do?
I was really in a bind. I could have gone ahead and spent about another year and a half and got my PhD. But would I have obtained a job as good as this? I was offered a job at the leading university in the United States as head of an Indian Studies department, the first one. And I only had a master's degree. I was about halfway through with my PhD. So if I got a PhD, would there be a availability like this at this time, a job open? And possibly there would, but I didn't want to take the chance, so I took the job, and I have to forego my work on my PhD at the present time. But in the near future, there's going to be many, many jobs that will open up. And our Indian people are going to have avenues, suddenly, that they can take to find employment. In the old days, there was so much discrimination that our people who did get degrees couldn't work in the school systems in the small cities and urban areas and what have you. But now, due to these ethnic studies programs that are suddenly springing up at different universities, there's a tremendous demand for Indian educators. Well, this will give our Indian students more of an incentive to get their education, because they can go to work in one of these. They're going to start crying for Indian teachers in high schools, junior colleges. because they're going to be teaching courses in Indian history and culture. So there will be an outlet for Indian people to work. And these programs that are being instituted in colleges are employing hundreds of Indian people. Right now there's a demand, tremendous demand for Indian educators. They're hunting Indian educators at University of Minnesota. We're hunting them at University of California, UCLA. They're hunting them at all over. I could name about 10 different colleges that are suddenly hunting Indian educators. So we're in demand for one time in history.
Yeah. Okay, good. Good.